Broken promises and delayed infrastructure are really a hallmark of this legislation, the appropriation bill before the parliament. But industry has, I think, really nailed it when they received the budget, when they studied the budget, looking forward to seeing what it would hold in these times of uncertainty that have been caused by a world pandemic that still require strong leadership and timely actions to address a very uncertain landscape. And their comment was, it's a missed opportunity to attract job-generating investment, that the pipeline of works is not clear, that there's blurred vision as a result of that. And let me quote more specifically from the Property Council, who said that the budget represents yet another missed opportunity for Queensland to attract the private sector investment the state desperately needs to create new jobs and facilitate new revenue streams. Very important statement, because not only do you need government stimulus expenditure, you need it to be spent in the right way, and you need to also look at how you engage with the private sector, who are keen to invest if it adds up. And unfortunately, this is a real failing in this this appropriation bill before the parliament. So disappointing, because at a time of great uncertainty you need strong and appropriate action, which has been missing from this Labor government, who did not deliver a budget going into an election, and then a few weeks later said, oh, look at us, we've got a budget, how hard we've worked. Well, that's a load of baloney. They'd already done the work. They didn't want to take Queenslanders with them and trust them and release the budget that they are working on. They only said that there was going to be $4 billion in only $4 billion, a lot of money, $4 billion. It's amazing how such a large amount seems to have shrunk now. $4 billion in additional borrowings, a lot of money. And we get to the other side of an election only a few weeks later with this budget they just put together, allegedly, and there's $28 billion extra in borrowing, a 7 times increase. Well, if they really want people to believe they didn't have a budget and the forecast and knew what they were going to borrow before an election, well, pigs might fly and fly backwards. They knew exactly what they were up to, and they didn't trust Queenslanders. It is a breach of trust, and it is also a breach of the opportunity to do something meaningful, because there is a place, obviously, for borrowings where it builds infrastructure in a timely way, the right infrastructure that generates jobs and leaves a legacy. But as we've heard from the Leader of the Opposition and my colleague, the Shadow Treasurer, there hasn't been a substantive net increase in the value to Queensland's bottom line, with this huge increase in borrowings, $28 billion. And so let's also quote from the master builders, who said, builders remain without a clear picture of the pipeline of work for the next 4 years, despite the Palaszczuk government confirming it planned the additional capital works project. So why is a pipeline of works important? And for those who don't deal in the area of industry and infrastructure and construction, pipelines are about having some certainty as to what works come on when. It's about being able to provide advice to industry so that they can train and employ people and have them ready to go when they know what works are coming to the market in what time frame. That pipeline is absent. That pipeline is not there. And that's coming from industry, who I think know a little bit more than the union hacks who just trot out their PR lines from their media friend. Well, not the free media. I'm talking about the government-paid media operatives who work within the offices of this government. See, this is a lost opportunity, which is such a shame, because we need the stimulus infrastructure, and it needs to happen in a timely way with clear road maps for industry to be able to employ people in the right areas in the right time. And not just the first-tier operators, the overseas internationals who can pick up the big jobs. We want to see Queensland, Australian-based industry able to have an opportunity with procurement that has them not just as the subbies, but has them also as head contractors and the opportunity to ensure that we're growing the second and the third tier of those industries and not just giving out the massive contracts to Tier 1 internationals who then sub out to the locals, but don't give them the opportunity to share in the IP and the opportunity to share as the lead contractors. And I think that's very important, because if you really want to get your best bang for your buck, have a pipeline that's transparent, have one that's fair dinkum, don't tell mistruths to the market, and then make sure that you include people in the market to be able to tender who aren't just the big Tier 1 internationals, that you debundle, you provide opportunity for maybe joint ventures, but certainly for Tier 2s and 3s to be able to build up the capacity here in our state to use Aussies and particularly Queenslanders in that value chain. That's also a missed opportunity in what we've heard from this government. Well, let me look at some of the figures that have come out. We know that across the border, and I know that this government gets a bit into the weeds of some of the games about talking about New South Wales and doesn't want to really look at the bottom line figures, because what's happened across New South Wales, yes, they're borrowing to build infrastructure and they're increasing the net worth of their state. And they have more than double, or about double, the amount of infrastructure coming online than what Queensland has. They're a bigger state, but they're not twice as large as Queensland, and Queensland's a state that needs to see a timely investment. So Queenslanders have been let down by this Palaszczuk Labor government that promised so much and is delivering so little at a time when there should be a ramping up of the infrastructure spend, with a pipeline of small, medium and larger projects coming online sooner rather than later, whereas many of the projects we've heard about are coming on board later. Terrible lost opportunity. We know that in Queensland before COVID there had been a huge decrease in the relative infrastructure spend that there should have been. There had been a $3 billion a year cut or reduction in infrastructure spend that has accumulated. And that's not even talking about the maintenance underspend here in Queensland. Some have even said it's bigger than a $9 billion underspend in infrastructure and closer to $12 billion. But with the regional infrastructure cuts or reductions in this budget on actuals from the last year to the capital purchases and capital grants that are outlined in this budget, Brisbane North, there's been $65.379 million reduction. Brisbane West, over 11 million. Ipswich, $93 million. Darling Downs, Maranoa, $63 million. Mackay, $32 million. Central Queensland, $21 million. Sunshine Coast, $37 million reduction compared to last year's actuals. And Townsville, $192. And it can go on. The Queensland Auditor General report into major infrastructure projects found that Building Queensland failed its legislative role while spending a massive $15.5 million on external consultants. And according to Infrastructure Association Queensland's investor survey, Queensland under Labor was ranked significantly below the Australian average for economic stability, the ease of doing business and transparency when dealing with infrastructure investment. Of all the times you need it, it's now. This is the time to reform the way you do things, the way government operates, to cut the regulatory burden, to enable people to get in there and invest in the private sector and through the public sector with the timely expenditure of the right infrastructure. But this is a missed opportunity. And you'll be hearing, members across the House will be hearing from my colleagues about specific portfolio areas. I want to address some of the areas in my electorate. Because time is short, I was going to address a range of the integrity failures we saw under this Labor government over the last term and certainly the last 5 years. And there's quite a long list, but time is running out. And I must also address the matters pertaining to one piece of infrastructure that's very important in my electorate. And it's called the Mooloolah River Interchange, but it highlights the very thing I've just outlined, a desperate need to bring infrastructure forward. And what we're seeing, this government actually getting slower, moving backwards. Is it possible? Yes, it is. And the Mooloolah River Interchange, I'll table the statement from the Transport Minister from 20th of June 2018, who said that the funding over 2 years for the Moola River interchange would support the development of a detailed business case for the project, currently scheduled to be completed by mid-2020. Goodness me, what's the date today? I think we're looking at the 3rd of December. Certainly it's not the middle of 2020. And what does this government do in their budget papers? They push that business case finishing date out now till, I think it's 21-22, way beyond the original deadline. And that started before COVID hit. And it might be funny to members who don't talk to families who've had loved ones killed at that interchange, who don't talk to people caught in congestion, but it matters. It matters hugely. My colleague, the member for Kawana, addressed it. I know the member for Buderim also addresses this, as it's at the intersection of 3 electorates, but it affects the whole Sunshine Coast. So if you want to save lives and stop people being caught in traffic, this is a significant issue that relies on that business case being completed. When we were in government, we acquired the majority of the houses, as I understand it, underneath the proposed corridor, and then this government got in. They said they'd do a business case, said it would be finished by the middle of this year, and it's off in Manana, off in 21-22, before the business case is finished. What a missed opportunity to build the infrastructure our state needs, to build the job-creating infrastructure, and to literally save lives. I want to also address issues to do with my electorate with the schools, and I am pleased to see funding for the Mooloolaba State Primary School. However, what we do need to see is master planning of these schools. And when you see schools that do not have a proper disability plan and they are building buildings in a way that is taking public space, playing ground space from those schools without any master plan to address the future of maintaining open space and playing space, sports areas for these kids, and have lost the opportunity to also build infrastructure that enables disabled kiddies to be able to access a wider range of the school, more flexibility for training staff, for teaching staff. That is a shame. And I would urge the Education Minister and this government, please do some master planning around the schools so when the opportunity comes to build these buildings, you actually get more bang for your buck, but you also enable a better utilisation of that space so that you don't just keep some of the disabled kids who need mobility access caught within a very limited range of buildings. I want to also acknowledge the outstanding work of Maroochydore State High School, that is now one of the leading state schools in Queensland, an independent public school that took the opportunity that was provided, certainly when we were in government, to enable schools to do and have more say over their choices. But full credit to the teachers and the parents and citizens and the whole range of those involved. With outstanding announcements, outstanding decisions, they are now a Showcase Award winner here in Queensland for their curriculum development as a high school, and full marks and shout out to them. To their credit, and I acknowledge the Education Department has worked with them to work on a master plan over that high school, and that's smart. We need to see more of that happening across more of our schools so that when they need the infrastructure, they need it now actually, they do need more buildings at that high school to meet today's needs and tomorrow, but you need the right infrastructure built. And we need to see more of these schools with these master plans so that when the buildings are built, it's within a much better integrated approach. And that's something I certainly support and I cheer on. But good on the teachers, the students, the parents and the families and community who have done an outstanding job at that high school. And I want to address also transport and also reiterate some comments of my colleague, again the member for Kawana, but it's shared space we have in regard to the issue of the business case, the government, the funding, been dealing with council, the mass transit. There is a real concern in our community that this is a Trojan horse for high density and foisting one preferred option being light rail through this corridor, which is not what the majority of the community want. We do need an integrated transport system, a public transport system, But be honest with people, release all the information, do not voice one option on them, and certainly we know from the preliminary business case that Council did, that included much higher density than what the appetite of our community has. We need to have the right infrastructure and the right planning to serve our area.